You're sitting across from her at that dimly lit cafe, your mind already racing ahead to the second date, the one with the exposed brick walls and the overpriced cappuccinos. But then the text becomes slower. She's laughing at something you said. Her hand briefly touching yours as she reaches for the suddenly, sugar packets. You're left staring at your phone. That fleeting contact sends electricity up the hell went wrong. And for a moment, replaying every word, every gesture, is the moment, every microsecond of that eyes meet yours, searching for there's something missed. The sign that looks like interest. Here's the brutal desire that most men never learn. You leave that night into their convinced you've made a connection. Your mind already racing ahead to the second date, to the third, to where this could all lead. But then the text becomes slower, the responses shorter, the excuses more creative. And suddenly, you're left staring at your phone at 2 in the morning, wondering what the hell went wrong. Replaying every word, every gesture, every microsecond of that evening, searching for the clue you missed, the sign you didn't see. Here's the brutal truth that most men never learn until it's carved into their souls through 1,000 rejections. You didn't miss a sign. The sign was there all along, screaming at you in a language you never learned to speak. And the master of reading these signs, the architect of understanding human behavior in its rawest, most unfiltered form, wasn't some modern dating coach or relationship guru. It was a Renaissance Italian diplomat who wrote his observations 5 centuries ago in a cold Florentine study, watching the games of power, seduction, and manipulation play out in the courts of princes and commoners alike. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something that most men today are too afraid to admit. Human beings, especially matters of attraction, are governed not by the romantic ideals we profess, but by the cold calculations we deny. And when a woman is not interested in you, she doesn't owe you a direct rejection. She doesn't owe you clarity. What she gives you instead is a performance, a carefully choreographed dance of politeness and social grace that keeps you at arm's length while maintaining her image as a kind, considerate person she believes herself to be. Think about the last time you felt certain about someone's interest in you only to discover you were reading a script they never wrote. That sinking feeling in your gut wasn't intuition failing you. It was intuition trying desperately to get your attention while your ego drowned it out with hopeful narratives and wishful interpretations. Machiavelli would tell you that most men lose not because they lack charm or looks or status, though those things matter. They lose because they refuse to see the battlefield for what it is. They walk into interactions with women carrying romantic ideals like shields when what they need is the cold, clear vision of a strategist who can distinguish between genuine interest and the elaborate kabuki theater of polite disinterest. And the difference between these two states isn't subtle. It's not hidden in some complex psychological code that requires years of study to decipher. It's right there, in plain sight, in actions so obvious that our desperate minds work overtime to explain them away, to reframe them, to transform clear rejection into ambiguous possibility. When a woman is truly interested in you, she doesn't make you guess. She doesn't leave you in suspense. She doesn't force you to become a detective analyzing every text message like it's the Rosetta Stone. Interest is obvious because interest is action, it's effort, it's consistency. It's the difference between someone who says they'd love to see you again and someone who pulls out their calendar right there at the table to find a day that works. Machiavelli observed that princes who wished to maintain power understood one fundamental truth. What people do reveals their intentions far more accurately than what they say. Apply this to your romantic life, and suddenly the fog clears. Suddenly, you are no longer lost in the wilderness of mixed signals because you realize there are no mixed signals. There's only your interpretation of signals that were actually quite clear, filtered through the desperate lens of hope. She tells you she's really busy this week. That sounds reasonable. People are busy. But then you notice her Instagram stories show her out with friends 3 times in the last 4 days. She said she needed to focus on herself right now, but you see her tagged in photos at parties, at dinners, at events, very much not alone and very much not focused on solitary self-improvement. The discrepancy between words and actions is the tell. It's always the tell. And Machiavelli will tell you that A wise man learns to trust behavior over promises, actions over intentions, patterns over excuses. Most men torture themselves trying to decode what went wrong, as if there's some magical combination of words or behaviors that could have changed the outcome. But here's what Machiavelli understood about human nature that our modern therapeutic culture tries to deny. Not everyone is meant for you, and no amount of self-improvement, charm, or persistence will create attraction where the fundamental chemistry doesn't exist. The woman who isn't interested in you isn't making a mistake. She isn't confused. She hasn't failed to see your true value. She simply doesn't feel what she needs to feel, and no amount of convincing will change that. This is where most men stumble into their greatest tactical error. They see lack of interest as a problem to solve rather than information to accept. They become the prince who, upon losing a territory, throws more soldiers into a battle that's already lost, hemorrhaging resources and dignity in pursuit of a victory that was never possible. Machiavelli would call this poor strategy. He'd call it the behavior of a man who doesn't understand the terrain, who mistakes stubbornness for persistence, who confuses delusion with optimism. Let's talk about what it actually looks like when a woman has decided you're not the one, but hasn't said it directly. Let's examine the specific behaviors, the particular patterns, the telltale signs that Machiavelli would have recognized instantly as the diplomatic language of rejection. Because once you learn this language, once you can read these signs with the same clarity you read stop signs on the highway, you'll save yourself months or years of wasted emotional energy, chasing ghosts and building castles in your mind that have no foundation in reality. The first and most obvious sign is the one men work hardest to explain away. She is consistently unavailable but never suggests an alternative. This is crucial. When someone wants to see you but genuinely has a conflict, they don't just decline. They propose a different time. They take initiative to reschedule. They demonstrate through action that your presence in their life is a priority worth protecting. But when a woman responds to your invitation with some version of, "Sorry, I can't make it," without any follow-up, without any counter-offer, without any indication that she wants to find a time that does work, she's not busy. She's not interested. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately as the diplomatic art of maintaining cordial relations while quietly closing the door. It's the political equivalent of a nation saying they're open to negotiations while systematically avoiding every proposed meeting. The message is clear to anyone willing to see it. The second sign builds on the first. Her responses are polite, brief, and devoid of questions. Think about how you text with someone you're genuinely interested in. You ask questions. You try to keep the conversation going. You look for threads to pull, topics to explore, connections to deepen. Now think about how you text with someone you're trying to politely fade out of your life. Short answers, minimal engagement, no questions that would invite further conversation. You're not being rude, you're not being mean, you're simply not being interested, and you're hoping they'll get the hint without you having to deliver the brutal clarity of direct rejection. When a woman's text to you read like customer service responses, "Thank you, that's nice, haha, cool," she's not playing hard to get. She's not busy, she's not tired. She's showing you, in the gentlest way her social conditioning allows, that she doesn't want to encourage further connection. Machiavelli understood that in matters of power and influence, enthusiasm cannot be faked for long. The person who wants something from you will reveal that desire through consistent effort and engagement. The person who doesn't want something from you will reveal that disinterest through consistent withdrawal and minimal investment, no matter how polite the packaging. The third sign is perhaps the most psychologically revealing. She talks about other men around you, or constantly mentions how she's not looking for anything right now. Some men interpret this as a woman trying to make them jealous, trying to create competition, trying to increase her value in his eyes. And sometimes, in rare cases involving genuine interest and immature game playing, that might be true. But Machiavelli would tell you to apply the principle of Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. When a woman tells you she's not looking for a relationship, or mentions other men she's interested in, or talks about her ex, or describes her ideal type and it sounds nothing like you, she's not playing four-dimensional chess. She's giving you information. She's drawing boundaries. She's trying to manage your expectations without having to deliver a direct rejection that might make her feel uncomfortable or guilty. The tragedy is that most men hear these statements and immediately begin plotting how to overcome them, how to be the exception, how to change her mind. They think they're the protagonist in the romantic comedy where persistence wins the day. But Machiavelli would remind you that you're not in a romantic comedy. You're in reality, where a woman who wants you doesn't need to be convinced to want you, and a woman who doesn't want you won't be convinced, no matter how perfect your approach. The fourth sign is the one that causes the most confusion and the most wasted time. She agrees to hang out, but only in group settings, or consistently brings friends when you try to arrange one-on-one time. This is the modern woman's version of what Machiavelli called maintaining the appearance of alliance while avoiding actual commitment. By saying yes to group activities, she gets to feel like she's being social and friendly. She gets to avoid the guilt of direct rejection. She gets to maintain the image of herself as someone who gave you a chance. But she never has to face the vulnerability and intimacy of actual one-on-one interaction. She never has to risk leading you on or dealing with your potential advances. The buffer of other people protects her from having to be direct about her disinterest. And here's where most men make their critical error. They view these group hangouts as progress. They think they're building comfort, demonstrating value, earning her trust until she's ready to see them alone. But what they're actually doing is accepting friendship zone activities while harboring romantic zone intentions. Machiavelli would call this a fundamental misreading of the political landscape. The prince who mistakes a neighboring kingdom's diplomatic dinners for genuine alliance is the prince who gets blindsided when war comes. The man who mistakes group-only hangouts for romantic progress is the man who ends up months later, confused and hurt, wondering why she seems shocked that he had feelings for her. The fifth sign is perhaps the most damaging to male ego and therefore the most frequently rationalized away. She doesn't prioritize your presence or your attention. When she has good news, you're not the first person she tells. When she's making plans for the weekend, she's not thinking about including you. When she's getting ready for a night out, she's not hoping you'll be there. You exist in her life as a peripheral character, someone she's friendly with, someone she doesn't mind seeing occasionally, but not someone she actively seeks out or makes space for. Machiavelli observed that you can measure someone's true priorities not by what they say matters to them, but by where they consistently invest their time, energy, and attention. A kingdom invests its resources in defending borders it values. A merchant invests capital in ventures he believes will profit. A woman invests her emotional energy and time in men she's genuinely interested in. When you're not receiving that investment, when you're getting the leftover attention after everyone and everything else has been served, you're not being valued, you're being tolerated. And there's a world of difference between those two positions. Now, here's where we have to address the voice in your head that's already formulating exceptions and special cases. Maybe she's been hurt before. Maybe she has trust issues. Maybe she's genuinely that busy. Maybe she's playing hard to get. Maybe she needs more time. Maybe. Machiavelli would tell you that the prince who makes excuses for his enemy's hostile actions is the prince who ends up overthrown. The man who makes excuses for a woman's disinterest is the man who ends up wasting months or years in a one-sided pursuit that was doomed from the start. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. When a woman is genuinely interested in you, none of those obstacles matter enough to stop her from showing it. Women who have been hurt before still pursue men they're excited about. Women who are genuinely busy still find time for men they want to see. Women who are playing hard to get still send signals of interest. They just add strategic delay. The woman who wants you will find a way. The woman who doesn't want you will find an excuse. And Machiavelli would tell you that the wise strategist learns to distinguish between obstacles that can be overcome and battles that cannot be won. Think about the women who have been genuinely interested in you in the past, if you've had that experience. Think about how different their behavior was from the women you chased, who were never really interested. The interested woman made things easy. She responded quickly. She initiated contact. She made time. She asked questions. She wanted to know you. She shared herself. She created opportunities for connection. There was no mystery about where you stood because her actions made it obvious. The uninterested woman made things hard. Every step forward required enormous effort. Every plan required perfect alignment of stars. Every conversation felt like pulling teeth. And the whole time, you told yourself that the difficulty meant it would be more meaningful when you finally won her over, not realizing that the difficulty was itself the message she was sending. Machiavelli understood that in matters of conquest, whether of territories or hearts, the campaigns that require the most force to win are often the victories that prove most unstable and short-lived. The kingdom taken by overwhelming military might must be constantly maintained by force. The woman won over by persistent pursuit, despite her clear signals of disinterest, will never feel genuine attraction, only the obligation created by your relentless pressure. This brings us to perhaps the most important Machiavellian principle in understanding female disinterest. It's better to be respected than loved, but it's better to be neither than to be pitied. And that's what you become when you continue pursuing a woman who has shown you through consistent action that she's not interested. You become pitiable. You become the guy who can't take a hint. You become the man who values her so little that you're willing to accept scraps, so desperate for her attention that you'll rationalize any behavior, so lacking in self-respect that you'll continue investing in someone who has shown you clearly that they don't value your investment. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must avoid being despised and hated above all else. In modern romantic terms, this translates to maintaining your dignity even in rejection, especially in rejection. The man who can recognize disinterest, accept it with grace, and redirect his energy elsewhere demonstrates higher value than the man who clings desperately to false hope, making himself smaller with each ignored text, each rescheduled plan, each rationalized excuse. Let's examine the psychological mechanism that keeps men trapped in these futile pursuits despite overwhelming evidence of disinterest. It's what modern psychology calls intermittent reinforcement. But Machiavelli understood it centuries ago in observing how rulers maintained control over subjects. Give someone everything they want, and they become complacent. Give them nothing they want, and they leave. But give them occasional, unpredictable rewards mixed with long stretches of nothing, and you create an addictive pattern that's incredibly difficult to break. The woman who's not interested but not completely cutting you off provides just enough occasional warmth, just enough sporadic positive response, just enough intermittent validation to keep you hooked. She doesn't do this because she's evil or manipulative, in most cases. She does it because she's human, because she enjoys feeling desired, because she likes having options, because she doesn't want to be the bad guy who delivers direct rejection, because she's keeping you as a backup plan, or simply because she hasn't thought deeply about the impact of her mixed signals. But her motivations don't matter. What matters is that you recognize a pattern and refuse to participate in it. Machiavelli would tell you that the wise prince doesn't waste resources on territories that cannot be held or battles that cannot be won. He redirects his forces to where they can be effective. He cuts his losses quickly, rather than pouring more investment into failing ventures. Applied to your romantic life, this means developing the ruthless clarity to recognize disinterest early and the self-respect to walk away when you see it. This isn't about being cold or calculating in some sociopathic sense. It's about valuing yourself enough to require mutual interest, mutual effort, mutual investment. It's about understanding that your time, energy, and emotional resources are finite and precious, and that spending them on someone who doesn't reciprocate is not romantic, it's self-destructive. The scarcity mindset that makes men cling to any woman who shows them the slightest attention is exactly what Machiavelli would identify as the weakness that prevents them from ever achieving the abundance they seek. Because women, like anyone, are attracted to people who have options, who have standards, who have the confidence to walk away from situations that don't serve them. Here's the counterintuitive truth that Machiavelli understood about power dynamics. The person who is willing to walk away has all the leverage. In politics, in business, in romance, The moment you communicate through your actions and your choices that you will accept whatever scraps of attention someone is willing to throw your way, you lose all negotiating power. You become the desperate prince sending tribute to the stronger kingdom, hoping for mercy, for recognition, for eventually being valued. But that's not how value is created in romantic dynamics. Value is created through scarcity, through standards, through being the kind of person who doesn't need any particular person because you have cultivated the qualities that make you attractive to many people. The man who can recognize disinterest, accept it without drama, and move on with his life intact, demonstrates the kind of emotional intelligence and self-respect that is genuinely attractive. The man who spirals into desperate pursuit, who takes every interaction as potential hope, who refuses to accept clear signals because acceptance would hurt his ego, demonstrates the opposite. So what does Machiavellian wisdom tell you to do when you recognize these signs of disinterest? The answer is simpler than you think, but harder than you like. You walk away, not with anger, not with dramatic pronouncements, not with attempts to make her jealous or realize what she's losing. You simply redirect your energy elsewhere. You stop initiating contact, you stop making plans, you stop being available whenever she has a spare moment. You become polite but distant, friendly but not invested, present in name only until even that presence naturally fades. You let the connection die the natural death it was always headed toward, rather than performing CPR on a corpse and calling it hope. This isn't game playing, this isn't strategy. This is simply alignment between reality and your behavior. She's not interested. You're accepting that and acting accordingly. Machiavelli would call this wisdom. He'd call it the mark of someone who understands how the world actually works rather than how they wish it would work. And here's what often happens. Not always, but often. When you do this, the dynamic shifts. The woman who was consistently unavailable suddenly finds time. The woman who gave one-word responses suddenly has questions. The woman who friend-zoned you suddenly seems confused about why you're not pursuing her anymore. This isn't because your absence made her realize she loved you all along. It's because you disrupted the comfortable dynamic where she got attention and validation without having to give anything back. You challenged her perception of her own desirability. By being the one to walk away, you created scarcity where there was abundance. And sometimes this shift reveals that there was some genuine but suppressed interest there all along, buried under fear or confusion or other options. But here's the critical Machiavellian insight. Even if she comes back, even if she suddenly seems interested, you have to ask yourself whether you want someone who only valued you when you stopped being available, who only made effort when you stopped making effort. That's not the foundation for genuine connection. That's just ego and control and the human desire to have what we can't have. The ultimate lesson from Machiavelli about female disinterest isn't about manipulation or game playing or becoming some cold, calculating seducer. It's about clear-eyed realism. It's about seeing people as they are rather than as you wish they were. It's about trusting behavior over words, patterns over promises, actions over intentions. It's about respecting yourself enough to require mutual interest before you invest emotional energy. It's about understanding that not being chosen by someone who isn't right for you is actually better than being chosen by someone who is. Because the relationship you built with someone who was never really interested, who you had to convince and pursue and win over through relentless effort, that relationship is built on obligation and guilt and surrender, not genuine desire. And Machiavelli understood that power structures built on coercion rather than genuine support are always unstable, always temporary, always doomed to collapse. You deserve someone who chooses you clearly, consistently, and enthusiastically. Someone for whom making time for you isn't a burden, but a joy. Someone who responds to your texts with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. Someone who creates opportunities to see you rather than obstacles. Someone whose actions match their words because both are aligned in genuine interest. That person exists, but you'll never find them while you're wasting your time, energy, and emotional resources on someone who's shown you repeatedly that they're not that person. The signal has been sent. The message has been delivered. The only question is whether you'll have the wisdom to receive it, the courage to accept it, and the self-respect to act on it. Machiavelli would tell you that princes fall not because they lack resources or intelligence, but because they refuse to see reality as it is, choosing instead comfortable delusions that feel better than uncomfortable truths. Don't be that prince. Don't be that man. See the signs, accept the message, walk away with your dignity intact, and redirect your energy towards someone who actually wants what you are offering. Now, here's where everything changes. You've absorbed these lessons, you understand the signs, you can recognize disinterest when you see it, but knowing and doing are different. The next time you find yourself in that cafe, across from someone whose eyes meet yours, you'll have a choice. You can repeat the old pattern, interpreting every polite gesture as profound interest, building castles of possibility on foundations of sand, setting yourself up for the familiar crash of disappointment. Or you can watch with clear eyes, measuring actions against words, looking for consistency rather than hope, requiring evidence of genuine interest before you invest yourself. You can become the man who doesn't need to decode mixed signals because he refuses to accept them. The man who understands that real interest is obvious, and anything less than obvious is a polite no. The man who values his time, his energy, his emotional resources enough to reserve them for people who demonstrate they deserve them. This is the Machiavellian approach to modern romance. Not manipulation, not cruelty, just unflinching realism about human nature, including your own. If this resonates with you, if you've recognized yourself in these patterns, if you're ready to stop wasting time on people who aren't choosing you, then do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we're just getting started exploring the uncomfortable truths about attraction, power dynamics, and human behavior that most people are too afraid to acknowledge. We're peeling back the romantic mythology to reveal the actual mechanics underneath. We're taking the wisdom of history's greatest strategic minds and applying it to the challenges you face right now, today, in your actual life. Every video on this channel is designed to give you the clarity, the framework, and the courage to see reality as it is and act accordingly. So subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next dose of uncomfortable truth. And while you're at it, smash that like button if this video shifted something in how you see yourself, your past experiences, or your future choices. Drop a comment below telling me which sign you recognize most in your own life. Or share your story of the time you finally walked away from someone who wasn't choosing you. Those stories matter. They help other men realize they're not alone in this. They create a community of people who are done with delusion and ready for clarity. So engage, participate, be part of this conversation. Share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Because we all know that guy, the one who's currently spinning his wheels with someone who's not interested, making excuses for behavior that doesn't require excuses, building elaborate explanations for something that's actually quite simple. Send him this video. You might just save him months or years of wasted time and emotional energy. The journey from self-delusion to self-respect starts with a single moment of clarity. Let this be that moment. Subscribe, like, comment, share. And I'll see you in the next video where we continue dismantling the comfortable lies and building something real in their place.